All right. Welcome back for another rip-roaring episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Of course, I'm joined by the one and only Amy Hollenkamp, RD.
Hello.
And this might seem like a not gut-specific episode because we're talking about New Year's resolutions. And that's like, all right, like, I want to hear about hydrogen sulfide SIBO, guys. But hear us out, stick around, come join the show for the next hour or so, because we wanted to talk about how you can achieve your goals. And that's all a resolution really is that you set a goal, you set an intention for some period of time, and we want to help you achieve those goals. Yes, we could do that by providing nerdy academic, gut-specific, microbe-specific information. But I think also looking at things like behavior change and like our mindset and how to track our goals and our achievements without making it too like hypervigilant OCD anxiety provoking, but still keeping yourself accountable. Like this is all really important if you have any sort of a goal, which all of you do. So stay tuned. That's my opening shtick. What do you think, Amy? What do you want to start us with?
Well, in the context of looking at IBS and gut dysfunction, it also is important. I know you're alluding to this, but the longer we work in this area, the more behavior and lifestyle is at the root of almost all IBS. Now, obviously, it might not be the whole picture for some. For instance, if you had like a food poisoning situation or you're on a PPI or something like that, or
antibiotics,
whatever.
And that cause dysbiosis.
Yeah, so it might not necessarily be the whole thing, but in order to get better, you have to really lock down a solid lifestyle. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but the longer that I work in this field, the more I think it's a lifestyle issue for most people. And again, when you're thinking of New Year's resolutions, it's like, what area of my lifestyle or life do I need to tweak? And probably the biggest thing that I would say is to not bite off more than you can chew when it comes to a New Year's resolution.
Yes.
Everyone's tempted to go from 0 to 100 in an area, but
people aren't tempted. That is exactly what they do, to be clear. Like, it's not just, this is what always happens, and this is why New Year's resolutions fail, right?
Yeah.
You have people out there who are like, oh, I don't do New Year's resolutions because they don't work. Well, they don't work not because they're inherently a bad idea. It's because of the execution. And I was actually just talking to a friend. I'm sorry I kind of took over mid thought on you. This happens like 3 times an episode, folks. Get used to it at this point. Just blanket statement apology for the rest of your life every time I cut you off. But if you think about it, I was just talking to a friend about this, and she has a friend who has some autoimmune stuff, some tummy stuff. And my friend is a health coach, and she was explaining, yeah, but this friend of mine, like, she'll eat a bagel for breakfast, and then she wonders why her energy crashes, and she doesn't really eat meals. She just kind of snacks on what her kids' leftovers are, and she's not moving much, and there's so much potential. And we were noodling on, well, does it make more sense to start kind of unglamorous with baby steps and have her just make a point to add 1 fruit and 1 vegetable per day to her existing meals and just focus on that sort of stuff and get her a bit more nutrition? Or does it make more sense to have her rip off the Band-Aid and try to go gluten-free for a month because she has autoimmune stuff, and maybe that'll help her feel a lot better more quickly, and then you could work on the other stuff. And I think that both paths are valid, and we kind of went back and forth on this, but I think a lot of people are going to find the more extreme way more appealing because it has this like sexy allure of like, oh, if I just do gluten-free, or if I do a Whole30, or if I do keto, or if I do carnivore, or if I go from really erratic, crappy sleep habits to bedtime at 9 p.m. every night, if you ricochet to the other side, you feel like you're going to feel better so much quicker. And A, that may or may not be true. because I think your body's going to be so deeply confused by what's going on. It may or may not really feel better immediately. You just might have to deal with the whiplash of going from one extreme to the other initially. But B, it's almost never sustainable. Like 99.999% of the time, the vast majority of us, when we do something that extreme or that quick, we abandon it within weeks or perhaps months. And that's why New Year's resolutions fail, because we're way too extreme in the way that we want to achieve these goals. And then we judge ourselves and we say, oh, I don't have discipline. I'm a failure. I couldn't do it. It was too hard. Or that diet didn't work for me. It's like, well, I don't know. Is that a surprise? I kind of think no.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I do think whenever you're doing any sort of goal, looking at sustainability or how long you're supposed to be doing it, AIP or any restrictive diet should have an end date or a date when you're going to shift the focus. And just as a side note too, I feel that a lot of people gravitate towards the more extreme because there's more structure around it. I think it also usually gives them more of a sense of control, which I think can appeal specifically to the IBS population and populations of people where their guts feel completely out of control.
I think autoimmunity too.
Yeah,
you feel like your
autoimmunity.
immune system is out of control and it's working against you and your immune system hates you.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I think that the sense of control can be very appealing. But yeah, I agree. It's unsustainable to just think, okay, now I'm AIP forever. It's like, oh man, like it's pretty intense.
Yeah, and I think too, something that came up when you were talking about control, I think is trust. I think a lot of us don't trust our bodies and we don't trust our experience of what's going on in our bodies. And I'm going to get on my soapbox for the millionth time in this podcast, but I partially blame functional medicine because functional medicine is oftentimes this experience, and like naturopathic medicine, the holistic kind of space, they will tell you, oh, you thought you could tolerate gluten, but here's this test result. I had this conversation yesterday with a patient. I kid you not. Here's your GI map that has an antibody that shows that gluten is slowly killing you and you had no idea. Oh my God. Or like, oh, you had SIBO and you didn't know. Oh, you had candida and you didn't know. Oh my God, you've had leaky gut all this time. How could you? And I think that the world in general doesn't promote trusting yourself and trusting your body and loving yourself and loving your body. But I think functional medicine actually makes that worse 9 times out of 10, which is unfortunate. So, if you do the first version of what I was telling my friend, right? Just have her introduce one fruit and one vegetable every day to her existing meal plan. And when she gets really solid with that, then she could think about the next step. Baby steps, she'll get more fiber, she'll get more nutrients, vitamins, minerals, polyphenols. It'll be great. But you have to kind of trust yourself to stick with that plan and choose like the correct fruits and vegetables. And you have to think of recipes and stuff versus if you just do AIP or if you just do keto, there's a regimented kind of system in place set for you. There's no thought and you don't have to rely on yourself. You don't have to trust yourself. You just listen to what the authorities or what the experts tell you to do. And then everything else is kind of on autopilot and you let the experts fix you instead of really digging deep and trying to learn this and figure it out in your day to day.
Yeah. And it feels, I think the really extreme diet and lifestyle changes feel like they're going to get you the results faster. And there's often that urgent energy in the IBS space of we all want to feel better yesterday. So it feels like, well, I could add a fruit and vegetable in every day, or I could do everything all at once and get better really fast. And again, because of you have a limited amount of resources. And so going all in on something, usually it's something else has to compensate. So if you're putting all your energy into some really intense dietary shift, you might have less time for fun, less time for connection. So everything has a cost benefit ratio too. And some people, again, might benefit going really intense low FODMAP for a few weeks or something like that, or a 4 weeks. So again, who's to say? I'm not saying that going on a more strict diet couldn't be helpful, but doing it with the mentality of just like, I have to get better as fast as possible, reckless abandon type energy can also get you into trouble. And you can sometimes get stressed because other areas are being neglected because you're all in on one area.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot even to pick apart with that idea. And we've said this before, neither of us are anti-low FODMAP diet.
Right.
But what we see 9 times out of 10 is that people are doing a very unhealthy version of low FODMAP, either because they're not being mindful of nutritional deficiencies and making sure they're getting enough fiber and thiamine and whatever else that they could be lacking on that diet, or they're doing it for way too long, where it's really meant to be maybe a 4 to 6 week elimination diet kind of thing, and then you bring the foods back to the best of your ability. And also, I think the mentality, the idea that we're starving the SIBO when we do something like low FODMAP, and it becomes this war energy kind of thing, like that, we don't have evidence of that. It's not, to the best of our knowledge right now, the idea that we could starve SIBO is simply not true.
Yeah.
So now, all of that aside, I want to bring in just a little dusting of irony to the podcast here. All right, let's dive into this one. I heard a term recently and I loved it so much. I wrote it down because I had to bring it to this episode. I think a lot of our people could be guilty of procrastinating.
Okay.
So that is to say, how many of you, like raise your hand if this is you, and I've done it too, how many of you listened to all the YouTube videos, all the podcast episodes? You go to the SIBO SOS Summit, you buy Ruskio's book, you buy whatever other book. You learn all the stuff, but then you don't ever implement it, or you don't implement it the right way. You're so busy on the learning and the researching the shit out of everything that you don't ever get to the application part. So like, okay, like you've heard us talk about the role of stress and mental health and connecting with others and vagal tone and how that all wraps up. Do you really need to hear more lectures or podcast episodes talking about the benefit of connecting with people? Or should you just get off your tuchus and go connect with people?
Right.
Or, you know, we've talked about the benefit of fiber. Do you need to learn anything else about fiber and special SIBO diets? Or could you just start challenging some foods and see where you could get more fiber in your diet? But yeah, I thought that was a fun term, procrastinating.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that term. But it I think in the IBS space, there is a high degree of health anxiety, which creates doubts, which then seems like you have to, which if you're in that health anxiety state of mind, it's like, oh my gosh, what if I react to something? Or what if I don't have the right information? I need to keep looking. It's like, it's almost like rumination central. Like you have to understand every element before you act. But in reality, action usually breeds clarity. Like if you act, you learn. If you're just sitting ruminating in your head or doing all this research without action, you're never really going to actually learn what works for you or what doesn't. So the more that you can act and experiment, the better clarity you're going to have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Because you could do all the planning in the world and find all the right, quote unquote, right information, but everyone's still different. What works for one person might not work for you. And I think there's general really good rules of thumb, but how one person manages stress might be totally different than how another person needs to manage their stress.
Yeah.
So
we've talked about us, like you enjoy competitive sports, like you'll go and play tennis and play a competitive game of tennis. And the idea of athletic competition at this stage of my life doesn't appeal to me, but I'll do painting, or I would, I booked myself a partial spa day and I just unplugged for 4 hours and, had like a facial and a massage and everything. So it really depends on the person. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think there's an idea that you need to find the exact right way or the exact protocol that's going to rid you of IBS. And again, in reality, the only way to figure out what's going to work is to act. That's the irony of it too. It's like you could do all the research in the world, but unless you experiment, it's going to be really hard to figure out what works or what doesn't.
And the irony too is that you could be procrastinating right now listening to us.
Right, exactly.
So, finish the episode because it's going to be a good one, obviously. But, see if there's any takeaways from this episode and then maybe take a break from all the researching and the YouTube and Instagram and the followers. And it's not to say that the stuff is bad, but it's the dose. It's how much of your time are you sucking up researching and learning instead of doing? Like, does it benefit you more to spend 2 hours researching IBS or researching SIBO and being on the forums? Or would it benefit you more to go take a 20-minute walk around your block 6 days a week with that same 2-hour chunk of time? Right. So we have a finite number of hours in the day, and you are, whether you realize it or not, you are choosing how to use your time. And again, if you're dedicating a lot of time to research, it's not that research is inherently bad. It's just that it can feed into this OCD anxiety kind of stuff that we're talking about, but also you're taking away time that you could be spending with friends and family or outdoor time or doing something you really enjoy or just living your dang life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
Yeah. But again, I think that having some understanding of what's going on and advocating for yourself at least a bit is valuable. We all have heard stories or we all have lived stories where you go to the doctor, they tell you to take an antibiotic, or they tell you to take something, and you just trust them, and you don't really think about it, you don't really research it, and then it bites you in the butt, and you have bad symptoms from that experience, or you find out it was unnecessary or inappropriate. So I think, teensy bit of research here or there and like stay aware and be an advocate for yourself. But if you're taking a deep dive on the Reddit threads and the Facebook groups and spending all your time there, it's probably not serving you very well. And similarly on social media, I don't know. I feel like social media should be enjoyable at the end of the day.
True.
My personal Instagram account, I pretty much exclusively follow celebrity dogs and cats, like Good Boy Ollie and Milo the Chonk, and K-pop groups that I like and comedians that I like. That's kind of it. That's my whole Instagram feed, more or less. And I know that that's not typical for people listening to us right now. Like, they have a lot of people on Instagram and they're trying to learn and and I see some of these people on Instagram and they scare the poop out of me, and I don't even have anxiety or health OCD.
Right.
There's one lady, I forget what her name is on Instagram, but I followed her recently and I think I'm going to have to unfollow her. She's a toxicologist and she basically tells you why everything in the world is slowly killing you.
Right.
And it reminds me of what I've talked about with the naturopaths who are into environmental medicine, and they're impossible to go out to dinner with because they have to go to the one and only certified organic restaurant in the whole city.
Right.
And then when you get there, they're still a royal pain in the ass and asking way too many questions of the server, and they're just being really anal. It reminds me of that. Like, this woman was even saying that native deodorant wasn't good enough because they use fragrance.
Right.
I'm like, okay, but that's probably better than like Secret or
Dove or something.
Dove or, would you rather that people are paralyzed because they feel like they don't know what to do and they're terrified of everything?
Right.
Or would you rather people make the switch from the aluminum deodorant over to native, which is now sold at Target and easy to get? It doesn't have to be perfect. And I feel like a lot of these accounts, they'll tell you not to use any products. You have to home make every single thing you put in and on your body, your deodorant, your face lotion. If it's not organic and homemade, don't do it. And then, and you have to chew every bite of food 30 times, and you have to work out for an hour a day, and you have to eat all organic. And it stresses me out.
Yeah. It reminds me of a friend, I haven't talked to him in a while. He used to run some of my classes at my gym that I would go to. Super great guy, and super fun as like a workout guy, but he was so intense about nutrition and like lifestyle, and to the point where he would drive like 2 hours to get this water from this well. Like, again, he was really intense about that kind of stuff, and he would never eat out at a restaurant because the meat was crappy, you know? And it's just like, but dude, you also now are like, I mean, you work out with a lot of people, so you socialize then, but you're literally having no fun. You're waking up every day, like going to work, and then spending all your time and energy trying to maintain your health and wellness. Like, I guess if someone really wants to live like that, and that's fair, you know, I'm not going to tell anyone how to live, but it kind of made me sad because it's like, maybe you need to like loosen the reins on some of these things so you have more time and energy just to have fun.
Live your life.
Right.
Well, and actually, this segues really well into another point that I'd written down in my notes for today, which is every now and then you can check in with yourself and ask, are my actions aligned with my values? And I saw this on like a coaching Instagram thing recently, and I think at the surface level, you could hear that, and people will kind of knee-jerk reflex go to, well, if you value health, then all of your actions need to be like in the promotion of health, right? I value health. I do. I do this for a living. I really try to practice what I preach. However, I also value fun and family. And I don't know if this is a value per se, but I have a very strong belief that life is short. It is fleeting. To the best of our knowledge, we only get one ride on this rock hurtling through space. Nothing makes sense. It's chaos. It's beautiful. It's all of these things packaged up. And again, like, I only know that I get this one ride on this rock, and I'm going to make the most of it. And yes, that means I'm going to eat potato chips or something that's not organic.
Right.
I'm like occasionally going to go out to a restaurant that just has garbage food.
Right.
And I think that actually does align with my values. Like, yes, I value health, and I try to do healthy stuff most of the time. Like, I eat enough fiber. I take my vitamins. I take my herbs. But yeah, you can have other values just besides health. And I think connecting with your loved ones and really experiencing life and enjoying your life while you're on this planet, like, those could be values too.
Well, and again, like, to me, I think health is inherently a value, but I'd almost argue to some degree, like, it's a vehicle to be able to do the things that you value. Now, I think some people could have a value that's fitness or performance or strength or something like that, where they just love feeling a certain way or feeling healthy, that kind of thing. But I think you're right. To me, though, it's like, what are you... If the simple goal is in your whole life and your whole focus is to be healthy, well, why? Like, there has to be more things behind that of what will a healthy body provide you? Which again, for you, it's being able to be like, do what you want to do and live a long, healthy life. Be there for your kids. There's a lot of different elements to that, but that's something to think about too. If you're really, focused on health and wellness, like, what would you do if you were IBS free? Try to do more of some of those things, even with IBS too.
Well, so you touched on two things actually, that I could fold in here. So one, I go to this herbalist conference every year. It's my favorite event of the whole year that I go to. And pretty much every year they have this guy speak who is like world renowned for working with cancer. He's a nutritionist and an herbalist, and he's just brilliant. He was going through some data. I forget what the study was, but he was doing his presentation this year, and he made the point of stopping the lecture and really talking about this idea. The only thing that matters for talking to clinical herbalists, he was saying like the only thing that matters when you're selecting treatment and how to work with clients. But to us, I would say this too, the only things that matter when you're choosing, a path forward or a treatment plan, does it help you live a better life or does it help you live longer? Mm-hmm. That's it. Those are the two. If it doesn't help you live a better quality life and it doesn't help you live longer, why are we wigging out about so much stuff? And I know that that's a really tangled question, but it did kind of make you pause a little bit in that lecture. I don't think I delivered it as well as he did. But yeah, we kind of lose focus. We almost need to zoom way out to the cosmic level. And again, remember, life is short.
Yeah.
We only get this one life. And I don't want to spend my life sucked into this deep, dark hole of like Reddit threads and Facebook groups and podcasts and stuff, scrambling to heal my SIBO, when also not living the life that I'm trying to ultimately live by healing the SIBO. So yeah, I don't know if I made that make a lot of sense, but hopefully somebody got it.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to be hyper focused on one thing and miss out on so many other great things? Yeah, it's a really valid point.
Or is there a level of good enough?
Right.
So again, like with nutrition, for example, is there a level of good enough where, okay, even if you do at the core of your being believe that FODMAPs feed the SIBO and you are terrified to feed the SIBO and you're not buying what we're saying and you're like, no, I really believe I'm feeding the SIBO with the FODMAPs, get out of here, ladies. Even if you believe that to be true, is there a level of good enough where you're starving the SIBO enough that you feel okay, but you're also not missing out on your life and you're still able to go do things or go to the occasional restaurant or enjoy your life or enjoy your food? So good enough is another sort of frame. I think also the other thing I wanted to mention before it flies out of my brain is going back to what you were talking about, this idea that people think that they'll be able to live their life and be happy after they treat their SIBO, but you kind of almost need to be happy and live your life in order to treat the SIBO.
Yeah.
A business coach that I've been following for a few years has a bit where he talks about, and hopefully I don't butcher it because I'm on the spot here. Most people believe in have, do, be kind of mentality. So when I have a negative SIBO breath test, I will be healthy and happy, and then I can do what I want to do, and I can live my life, right? Have, do, be. That's how most of us assume it works. But he's a really big proponent of you have to go the opposite. It has to be, do, have. And I'll just talk about this like in the context of business this time, because this is how he frames it. Instead of thinking, when I have the perfect email marketing setup, then I will be successful and then I will act like a successful business person. His kind of shtick is you need to act like a successful business person first, and then that will bring these things to you more naturally. So I think similarly, instead of thinking, well, when I get a negative SIBO test, then I will be happy and healthy and then I can live my life. Like you almost need to live your life and then that will make you happy and healthy. And then that will give you the negative SIBO test that you so crave. Right. I think that there is some really valid truth to that. Now, again, is it that simple for every single person? Of course not. But I do think it's a piece of the puzzle for most.
Yeah, it's a total mindset shift that I think even just doing it on a minimal level of trying to be or trying to kind of go after the things you want, even if it's not in its totality, like 100%. Even if you're starting to shift to where it's like, oh, I'm doing more of the things I want to do, is going to make a big impact. Well, too, I know we're into this podcast a little bit. What are your New Year's resolutions? Do you have any that you're going to work on?
Yeah, I think so. What's really funny? I knew we were recording this episode today, and I had not thought of my own resolutions up until this moment. So you're catching this very much on the fly. I think for me, honestly, and you know better than anyone because I send you Marco Polo messages and text messages pretty much every day of our lives at this point. 2023 was a little bit rough. Not gonna lie, it wasn't. It could have been worse. I acknowledge that, but it was just a really rough year.
I don't know. Could it have been worse?
Don't try the universe. I swear to God, Amy, if you bring, I'm going to have to wear my underpants inside out for the rest of my life at the rate you're going. That's a long story, guys. But
I knocked on wood, by the way.
Good. So no, it's, it always could be worse. I'm alive, aren't I? So I'm not going to, challenge the universe or anything. But honestly, from like mid-November, basically starting with the Diagnostic Solutions threatening to sue me over the GI map debacle, which was right around Thanksgiving last year. From that point up through nowish has just been the clusterfuckiest year ever. And I feel like, honestly, my New Year's resolution is just to take it easy a little bit more, like slow down and re-engage with some hobbies. Like I haven't been painting a whole ton this year, and I think that is needed, and I'm feeling inspired to paint again recently. Go on more nature walks and do more foraging and frolic out in the woods, basically. That's another kind of goal. I think that's my biggest goal, is just to kind of slow down and live my life a little bit more again. That's probably the primary. And then health-wise, I think I finally have reached a point where I'm cool to not experiment on myself for a little while. So, in 2022, I was doing that experiment where I would try a new prebiotic, and then I would do stool testing, and then I try a different prebiotic, and then I do stool testing. And the first couple, my body hung in there just fine. And then after a while, I was like, oh, this is a little bit much, actually. My gut is getting kind of whiplash from going back and forth. So I paused that project. And then I had my antibiotics with my surgery, and I've been tracking my microbiome through that process. And I kind of intentionally have not done a lot of prebiotics and probiotics because I just wanted to observe my microbiome and see how long it took to recover and go back to normal. So I was a little bit like hands off, just watching it and eating my normal diet and not trying to fix it. But now at this point, I think just gotten to a point where I'm like, no, I think I could work on stuff, and I'm not going to track it. I'm not going to make it a big science experiment anymore for a while. So recently I landed at 1 scoop of PHGG per day, and it is so helpful. What's funny is when I tried PHGG for the initial experiment and I did 2 scoops a day, I actually hated it a lot because it made my stools like, yes, I was pooping more, but they were like sticky. And it was not a pleasant experience, but I found being more moderate in my approach and just kind of being curious about it. I followed that curiosity. I've been adding a single scoop of PHGG into these chai lattes that I make myself in the morning during the winter, and my gut loves it, and I'm pooping like a champion. And I didn't do any pre-testing to track this. I'm not going to do any post-testing. I'm just going to do things that make me feel good and not track it and make myself a guinea pig for YouTube, at least for this year, I think.
Nice. Well, yeah, you deserve a break.
Thank you.
I like the idea of just chilling a bit.
Chilling like a villain, man.
Chilling like a villain.
How about you? What are your New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I forgot that this was the episode that we agreed upon. So I also am not I am also ill prepared for this discussion. I feel like this year has been very whiplashy for me too, just with lack of sleep, but that's been better. I don't think that's with any lack of trying on my end. But the guitar, I've been playing it, but it's not necessarily as regular. I'd like to get back into that a bit. Like, even if I'm playing 10 minutes a day, just being able to pick up the guitar for a few songs really helps with just your fingers. Because again, a lot of times I'm playing, once a week now, where it's like, oh, I have like 20 minutes. I'm just going to play on the guitar. but you don't really make any gains that way. Like I'm just sort of stuck at a level, which is still fun. I can pretty much pick up and play a lot of songs. Like I could still play a lot of songs, but some of the bar chords and things that are a little more technical, I'm still not super smooth with transitioning between chords of some of the tougher chords. So I'd like to get back into that. Would probably be my biggest resolution. I'll have to think if any other resolutions come up.
Well, you had already announced this in a previous episode, but you're writing a book.
That's true.
That's like a more business focused resolution, is to keep working on the book and I'm gonna guess finish it this year.
Oh yeah. So let's see. So I've been writing in a big Word document essentially. And I would say if you break it down as a typical book is about 300 words per page, a typical book that you would read. I'm probably like a little over 50 pages in. So, and I'm trying to make it close to like 200 pages. I don't want it to be like a crazy long book. So,
because then again, it turns into that procrastinating for people a little bit.
For sure. Like, I can hear Cece crying. She's saying open to my door. I think she can hear me.
Aww.
But yeah, I agree. I want to make it so, there's some analysis of what IBS is, an understanding of that, but I want a lot of it to be practical tools that you can use. So yeah, I'm trying to not make it a really huge task to read. So, which sometimes I am verbose and I do like to cover topics pretty intensely. So I will probably need your help and other people's help to narrow stuff down if I need to remove things. But I'm excited about it. It's been really fun. I'm trying to keep it like a fun energy versus getting super stressed out. Sometimes I'm like, how is this flowing? But I'm trying to kind of keep writing and then kind of analyze flow a little bit later.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it's been really fun so far. It's getting me back to the roots of my writing when I blogged all the time.
And that's how I found you.
Yeah, so the blogging was a little easier because you're basically covering one topic. I think the more challenging aspect of the book is how you weave everything together in a cohesive story and a cohesive tool. Yeah. Right. So there's definitely more of a challenge, but it seems to be fun so far. So I've been enjoying that challenge a lot. So yeah, that is another big one. I've already set kind of a goal. Typically most weeks I try to write at least 1,500 words. So I've been pretty consistent. I think there's only 1 week or so that I missed, maybe 2, but it was like when we were I had a whole bunch of traveling things. And I think I missed hitting that mark during that week.
Which is understandable, for the record.
Yeah, I don't beat myself up too much about it, but I do like to push myself to try to hit that 1,500 word just to keep me moving. So that will keep me moving to where hopefully the majority of the writing's done by the summer, and then I can have people edit, and so it won't be done by that point, but
it won't be out for public viewing at that point, but
right.
Yeah.
I would think again, like probably around this time next year, I would think maybe a little before, I don't know.
Fall or winter.
Right.
You also just maybe accidentally touched on something that I think is a very reasonable goal or something that could weave in with this resolution conversation, which is this idea of falling off the horse and getting back on. So oftentimes people will say, oh, I don't have the discipline, or I'm not like motivated enough, Or, I'll use exercise as an example, but this could definitely apply to nutrition changes or supplement changes or anything else. Bedtime routine. People will oftentimes try to exercise and they maybe do it for a week or two or three, maybe a month or two, and then they fall off the wagon. And then a while later, they'll pick it up again and hooray, I'm exercising again. And they usually do too much all at once.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable again. And then, and then something comes up in your life, right? You have travel, you have a wedding to go to, the holidays come up, you have company in town, you get, you pull something and have a little bit of an injury, something happens and you're not able to stick with your workout routine for whatever reason. And then, you're fully off the horse and you don't go back to it for a while. And I think that just adopting a more flexible mentality is helpful. Like if you do fall off the horse, so to speak, that's okay. That's part of life. Things come up. You were just saying that you have this goal to write a certain amount every week, but there were a couple weeks when you were traveling that it didn't happen. And I didn't hear even the littlest inkling of you going like, bad, Amy, bad.
Right.
For the record, I just slapped my own wrist. That's what that noise was. But, you weren't beating yourself up. You weren't like, oh, I failed at my goal that week. And you weren't freaking out. You were just like, well, yeah, I was traveling and it just didn't happen that week. And then I got back into it the next week. Yeah, okay. Like big whoop-de-doo. But that is something I see pretty frequently with, again, nutrition and exercise. It's like, okay, I'm on the Whole30 and I'm really, really strict with the Whole30. And then I go to an event or I'm out and about and I'm starving and I have to get something to eat and it's not Whole30 compliant. And then, oh, screw it. I'm off the diet. I just might as well do nothing now. And they totally give up and fall off the horse and beat themselves up until the next New Year's resolution comes up or the next challenge comes up or the next, like a Facebook group challenge or something pops up on an ad. And then they get into it. And I think that we could probably be more flexible in that approach.
I think a couple things to touch on in that vein. Armand's like this, where he'll go and he'll work out 6 days in a row and he's so sore and it's like, ugh. And then he'll again travel and he's so flip-floppy. So it'll be like 2 weeks of intense exercise and then nothing for 3 weeks and then 2 weeks of and it's like that. And I have whiplash watching it. Whereas I'm usually very consistent with whatever I do, but maybe it's only 2 days a week. It's very sustainable. Again, what I do is sustainable. What Armand does is not. Or at least for him, some people it could be sustainable if they love fitness, but like Armand doesn't necessarily love fitness. So, the sustainability aspect comes into play there. And the part you were talking about where you don't necessarily, I think shame is such a bad motivator. I think when you go into a shame spiral when you failed at something or you, even failing seems such an intense word, but if you miss the mark a day or something like that.
If it just doesn't happen for a day.
Right.
Or a week or a month or whatever.
Right. The shame side of things never gets you very far. It's more, again, you're basically telling yourself like, you failed versus being like, hey, it's okay. Like everyone has rough weeks. So let's be kind to ourselves. Like, how are you talking to yourself in those moments is also something to keep in mind. But the more you can be compassionate and kind to yourself during moments and understand like, wow, you hit the mark like 90% of the time. This one squirrely week is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Like you're moving forward. It's just a weird bump and you're right back where you need to be. So looking at it in the context of how many weeks you actually did hit the mark can also be helpful too.
Well, and another way to say something kind of similar, but related, but a little different is I recently saw this on an Instagram post, again, from like a coaching group or something. And the coach made the point of saying, for every time, if you look at this behavior, and I'll use myself as an example, my my relationship with exercise has been a little bit of a mishmash. I think though, I don't know which one I guess I'm a little bit closer to Armand in this spectrum, but I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm kind of my own thing. So what'll happen with me is, so I was a rower all through, part of high school and all of college, and it was competitive and it was wonderful and sometimes terrible. And I just was kind of burnt out afterwards. And without rowing in my life, I was never like super into fitness. I wouldn't say I ever loved working out aside from rowing. I really did love rowing. But other than rowing, I kind of was like whatever on everything. And so what kind of ended up happening after college was initially after college, I was like, I'm done. I need a break. No. And I kind of associated working out with rowing, and I was kind of just done with it for the time being. So I took a hiatus. And then through like the rest of undergrad and grad school, I had blips where I worked as a personal trainer, and then I had access to a gym, and I had the time and the ability. And like I worked out not super intensely, but I worked out fairly regularly when I actually worked at a gym as a trainer. And I enjoyed it, and I was pretty okay with it again. And then when I got into the real world and I started working and building my practice and starting on YouTube, and then I had a kid, like the last 10, 15 years of being an adult in the real world, it's been very inconsistent. And I will like, I'll join a gym or I'll do a thing and I'll be like, yeah, this is it. And I'll do it for a few weeks or months and then fall off the horse for a while. And then I get back into it and then I fall off. I don't think I beat myself up too much, but I've always had this loose goal of, oh, I should work out again. Like that's something I need to get more in the habit of. And, similarly, I fell off the horse this summer. I was doing a pretty good job of doing some exercise, a couple days a week, not doing anything crazy, but moving at least, going on walks, doing fitness martial routines, doing weightlifting, something. I was doing pretty good for the last like year and a half. And then re-recording FODMAP Freedom this summer took a lot out of me. It was such a beast of a project. I'm very proud of it, but dear God, it was a lot. And I could not make the time to work out for basically the whole summer and into the early parts of the fall. I just couldn't do it. And, I know that exercise is good for me. I know it would be a wonderful thing to do, but am I going to beat myself up because it was just like a really busy, weird season of my life and I just couldn't make it happen? No, I don't think there's value in shaming myself or beating myself up, but I'm actually just in the point now when we're recording this November where I could start thinking about it again. And I'm excited to get back into it. But yeah, I don't think that the shame does any good. It might motivate you for a very short amount of time and it might scare you into action for a very short amount of time. But I think the better way to approach it is something is always better than nothing. So even if you work out one time every other week, that is still more exercise than you were doing previously. And that is something to be applauded. Stick with something that's sustainable and something you enjoy. If you don't like running on the treadmill, please do not run on the treadmill because you're not going to do it for very long. Find something that you're actually kind of cool with. Like I like my fitness martial and I like doing the weights, but I'm not a super big runner. So I kind of make a point to not run. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling now, but just sticking with something that is sustainable is important. But the thing that this coach was saying and started this tangent was the idea that, yes, I've fallen off the wagon or fallen off the horse, so to speak, with my workout routine many, many times. But every time I've fallen off, there's also a time where I've gotten back on. So no, you're not a quitter. You're not lacking discipline. You're not a loser. You actually are proving that you have perseverance because, again, every single time I stopped exercising, I did eventually pick it back up and I got back on the horse. So just a little reframe. Like, are you going to look at the 57 times that you fell off the wagon and you failed? Or are you going to look at the 58 times that you had the guts and you had the motivation to do it again and try again?
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost to like approaching some of these habit changes with a sense of curiosity as well. So even if things don't go as planned or you do fall off the horse, it's not in a shaming way at all, but just to say like, like that's interesting. Like, why was that? It might be a very legitimate thing. Like, oh, I was just super busy that week. But it also could be like, oh, maybe like my schedule shifted. Like, is there anything you can change to make it easier for yourself to implement? Maybe not. But I do think sometimes when you approach some of these situations, like having a new goal, just to see, is there any way that you can manipulate your life to make it easier? Because forming a habit is hard. That's the other thing. Like, people
And it takes
always
time.
Yeah, people always talk about how resolutions fail, but forming a habit can be really challenging. So it's not a huge surprise that a lot of times resolutions fail. So the more that you can make it slightly easier on yourself, whether that's maybe you have to schedule time in to do something that you're working on. Maybe you get your family involved and say, I really want to do this, but you need some accountability, or you need some of their help watching your kids so that you can go to the gym or something like that. So I also think trying to make things as easy as possible for yourself. I know habit stacking is another thing that they talk a lot about. So if you do something regularly each day, you can try to stack the new habit with an existing habit, which seems to help implement strategies.
Do you want to give a quick example of habit stacking just for people who might not be familiar with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it could be as simple as like you brush your teeth every morning. Let's say you were trying to implement a new skincare routine or something. Maybe you do it after you brush your teeth because the teeth brushing has already been established. It's like you don't even think about it anymore. So you say, okay, I'm gonna wash my face and put on my creams right after I brush my teeth. And it can help anchor your new habit. But yeah, so habit stacking, I think, can be helpful. And just acknowledging, too, that this is another favorite thing from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks a lot about the valley of disappointment. We've talked about this at some point on the podcast, I know. Is just that you might not necessarily get the return on your investment right away when you add a habit in. So if you change your diet up or you add movement in,
or if you start working on stress, your IBS might not be cured 2 weeks later.
Right, exactly. So I think my favorite example from his book that he gives is a stone cutter bangs on a stone 99 times, and each of the 99 times it does not break, but the 100th time it breaks. Are you just going to go and say that, it was just that one time? No, it was all the 99 times that the stone cutter hit the stone before that weakened the stone that made it able to break.
I have another similar metaphor, actually. And it's similar, but again, I like to paint this picture sometimes with students. The last thing a fruit tree ever does is bear fruit, right? So if you picture, and I'll use us as example. So when I was really, really little, like 2, my parents planted a peach tree in my grandparents' yard. And that was like Nikki's peach tree. Okay, somebody took that peach pit and put it in dirt and took care of it for probably months, if not a year or more, at the tree nursery. And then my parents brought home this baby tree and planted it. You don't want to be the knucklehead who plants a peach pit or an apple seed, takes care of it for like a month, and then gets pissed off that you don't have apples yet and storms off and abandons the tree, right? We know from prior experience that this takes time. We know from prior experience from many, many other human beings that you plant the seed or the pit, it grows into a little tiny baby tree, you take care of it, it grows up into a medium-sized tree, and eventually it grows into a full-size beautiful tree without fruit yet. And if you're patient for just a little bit longer, finally you are rewarded for your patience with the frickin' fruit that you want.
Right.
But again, you don't want to plant the peach pit and then abandon the tree because you think, oh, it doesn't work for me. some things take time, and you're not going to always see the changes and the growth. It's going to be beneath the surface for a while, but you have to have faith that you're doing the right thing and that you are going to get peaches from this tree. And that's exactly what happened with my parents growing this peach tree. Eventually we did get wonderful peaches from that tree, but it was not immediately.
Right. There has to be a level of commitment to the process of getting
commitment or just faith in a weird way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. But yeah, I like that. I like how James Clear worded it as the valley of disappointment, because there's no truer statement that's ever been said. Because honestly, if you could just go to the gym a couple times and be ripped, wouldn't that be amazing?
Great.
I mean,
yeah.
Everyone would be ripped, I feel like, if you just had to go once or twice. But yeah, it's I think the muscle conversation always helps, because it's like, oh, if you go to the gym, you're not going to just immediately get muscles. But that could be applied to so many different aspects of habit formation.
Yes. And I think that part of the problem, going back to what I said about having some faith in the process, kind of stems back to what I said, which is most of the people listening to our podcast right now probably don't have a great deal of trust in themselves or their body.
Right.
Well, how are you supposed to have faith in the process and have faith that you're doing the right thing if you don't trust yourself and you don't trust your body and you don't love yourself? So in a really weird roundabout way, we came back to the same idea, which is trusting yourself and loving yourself and listening to your body above all else. But, sometimes it's easier to put your faith in a person or a system. And, in FODMAP Freedom, I tell people, well, even though I'm giving them all this great information and these protocols and stuff, they still get a bit deer in the headlights on me at some point in the middle of the program, where they start getting really overwhelmed by all the stuff I'm teaching them and like, whoa, this is a lot. And I have to keep reinforcing this with students too. You have to have some faith in the process. And I know that you've never seen this before. You have never seen a fruit tree bloom before in this instance, but I have. I've seen so many fruit trees bloom. You just have to take my word for it a little bit and trust in the process, trust in me, trust in your body, and just keep plucking away at these things that seem like they're doing nothing, but I assure you they are.
Right.
So.
Right.
Just keep the faith, people.
Keep the faith. Keep on keeping the faith. I feel like I had a point, but it just left my brain.
That's okay. I have something to ask you. What should our New Year's resolution be for the podcast?
It's a good question.
I have a couple of ideas, but I'm curious.
I have a couple of ideas. I know we've done a few of these in the past, but never on a regular basis, but to do Q&As. Or like maybe we have, I signed up for Chris Masterjohn has some sort of, subscription. I think it's $150
like a membership
year
or something.
But he has articles and stuff that aren't free, and they're really, really well done. I'd highly recommend it. But he does like listener Q&As where he pulls them from a hat and answers a question. We could do maybe shorty episode, like a short or something each week. You're hearing this in real time. We're sputtering off ideas.
Yeah, we are spitballing so much right now. We have no idea.
But yeah, that was interesting to me. Like, could we do a shorty, like shorties?
Yeah, I think some manner of a Q&A could be cool.
Yeah.
I think also just continue to bring on some cool people. I know we have a cool guest coming up really soon. I think the episode's actually going to post on Christmas Day, if I remember correctly. So that'll be a fun one. But, I think maybe it's high time we hunt down Lucy Mailing. We've been talking about doing that for a while, and we've talked to her about it, and she's game to come on, for the record. I'm not just making this up. So yeah, just having some interesting folks come on. I think that could be another goal. My biggest goal for the podcast, though, is that we get to meet in person. I said this last year, and we didn't achieve it, but I'm not going to beat myself up. It was a crazy year, but yes, I think 2024 can be the year that Nikki and Amy finally meet in person and do all sorts of squirrely business.
Woo!
And I think we should aim to record a podcast episode where we're sitting in the same room, looking at each other. This is going to be a logistical nightmare for Mixmaster Mike to edit and do the audio and not have feedback from the two microphones. But by God, we'll make this happen.
People do it all the time. Like, I feel like podcasters...
They might have soundproof studios, though, and like sound deadening and stuff. That's okay. We'll figure it out. Mike can worry about it later.
We're going to have to sit so far away. The camera shot is going to be us on opposite ends of the room.
There's got to be a way to do it. I mean, even if you look at the Try Guys podcast, for example, they're all kind of cozy in that room together.
Right.
I think what might help us if we did something like this is mostly you, would have to be really good about like talking into the microphone and talking like this instead of like this, which Amy totally does.
True. I'm a fidgeter.
Yes.
I'm a fidgeter from way back.
It'll be a really weird episode because we'll be in the same room, but also we're going to duct tape Amy to the chair. And then we're going to like duct tape her head in place so that her mouth has to point at the microphone for the whole episode. And then we might get good audio quality for this imaginary episode.
I'm going to look like a hostage.
You will kind of be.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I'll be a hostage for the
we'll figure
episode.
it out, though.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I thought we've been meaning to do that, haven't we?
The rendezvous or the duct tape part? I think the rendezvous maybe is a better idea.
The rendezvous.
Yep.
We need to figure that out.
That's my goal again. It was my goal last year for us. I'll make it my goal again this year for us that we will get to meet in person and finally seal the deal on this multi-year friendship. And yeah, we'll just have to figure out the mechanics of how we're going to make that happen. But
sounds good.
I have faith in us.
Tip of the old hat to you.
All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. So I hope that this episode provided something of value to you. I hope that you have more ideas for your New Year's resolution. I'm going to close us out by saying also, I would give yourself about 90 days to really try to work on whatever you're working on. So if you choose to really focus on sleep or stress management or movement or nutrition, whatever it might be, I would give yourself a solid 90 days. There is some research to support the idea that it takes about that long to really make significant changes in your habits or your behavior. So yeah, maybe instead of making a new year resolution, maybe we need to do like a new quarter resolution and have quarterly goals every year. And that way you have the 90 days that you can work on, but then also you have like another thing that you could work on a little bit later in the year. So
I like that idea.
Quarterly resolutions. The heck with New Year's resolutions. Quarterly resolutions. That is the new thing. Hashtag quarterly resolutions. Tag us in the post. Because I think that's probably the way to go. And we will see you right back here for our next episode of the podcast, where we're going to talk about how to do a legit cleanse or a detox, which is probably a New Year's resolution for at least some of you. So this will kind of be a part 1, part 2 in a way.